thought I'd continue with the dramatic music. I liked it from the last video, so I thought I'd keep it going. All right, let me sort that out. And here we go. Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Dr. Matt. I'm the guy that will give you the medical take on sporting topics. And today we're back again talking about RAUL Jimenez and his horrific head injury that he suffered this weekend in his match versus Arsenal. So just to recap, on the weekend there was a horrible clash of heads between David Luiz, Arsenal's defender, and RAUL Jimenez, Wolves striker. To cut a long story short, RAUL Jimenez unfortunately was knocked out cold. He had to be packaged up and sent over to the hospital, and he's undergone surgery for a skull fracture. Now the Wolves club doctors already released a statement saying things are going well, early doors with RAUL, and I know he's in good hands over with the Wolves medical team, so fingers crossed. Now, I've already done a video talking about David Luiz and why he was able to play on. So if you haven't checked that out, I'd advise you to go and watch that because it gives crucial information on concussion and how we diagnose concussion. This video, however, is talking about RAUL Jimenez and his injury, which is extremely interesting. I've actually got a piece of longer form content coming for you guys in which I sit down with a neurosurgeon, so someone who actually does that type of surgery, and he explains what type of surgery RAUL Jimenez has and what we might expect from his recovery. So that's coming for you. I'm in the process of editing it. So in this video, I'm not going to focus on the operation and immediate complications from the operation. What I'm going to focus on is the rehabilitation aspect and some of the challenges he might face and the club doctors might face trying to get RAUL Jimenez back onto the pitch. As I always say, if you like this type of content, if you like this type of niche point of view on sporting topics, make sure you hit subscribe. That way you get all the notifications, and it really helps me if you drop me a like and share. So RAUL Jimenez, he had a massive clash of heads with David Luiz. He goes to hospital, he has a scan of his head and brain, and he's found to have something called a depressed skull fracture. Now you can imagine your skull as a sphere, right? So you can imagine someone just hitting it like that, bang, and he's basically got a dent in his skull. And I'll put some pictures up so you can see that pretty clearly. As you can imagine, it's a potentially very, very serious injury. So once the neurosurgeons see the scan and see that this guy's got a cracked skull, they have to decide whether to operate or not. In RAUL's case, they decided to operate. So what they literally do is they go in, they see the area of the skull that is displaced and been dented in, and they literally elevate it back into line with the rest of the skull and then use plates to keep it in place. Once that happens, the recovery begins. And this is what I want to get into, because so many people have been asking me, how is he going to recover? How is he going to get back? Now, I'm going to say it clearly now. These types of injuries are not the type of injuries that we normally rehab, okay? And that obviously represents challenges. And as I said, I've got a piece of content talking directly with a neurosurgeon about some of the technicalities of that. But there's some important things that you need to know. So the first thing you need to know about this injury is that the fractured skull is just the beginning, okay? So the breaking of the bone is the easy part. The interesting thing is that when bones break, we're not as worried because the healing of bone is quite predictable. By 6 weeks, most bones are relatively well healed. And by 12 weeks at the latest, we're very confident in the strength of that bone. What's more important is the damage to what's underneath the skull, and that is the brain. Now, you saw how high impact that injury was, and we know that bone has been broken. The worrying thing is that, firstly, did that bone damage the brain or blood vessels that surround the brain and provide blood to it? That's important. That's important to know, because if it's just a matter of the bone being broken, then RAUL Jimenez is going to have a very good prognosis, okay? And once the bone is healed, he'll be in a position to move forward. If there's been other brain damage, so if there's been a minor traumatic brain injury, or worse, in that the bone fragment is actually cut into the brain or the layer surrounding the brain, you could have a lot of bleeding, a lot of physical damage to the brain, and then that requires bigger surgery and takes a lot longer to heal. So if I was a doctor in a club, what challenges would we face and how would we rehab RAUL? It would be a multidisciplinary team effort. It'd be a big effort, and it would require lots of different members of the team to come together to help. So I'd break it down into 4 domains that RAUL would have to recover from before he could return to the pitch. The first thing we would need is a neurosurgeon to sign him off. So from like a structural point of view, to tell us that, okay, the brain's in good condition, the skull's in good condition, we're confident that he can actually perform sports, contact sports, and that if he has another hit to that area, that he's not going to have big problems. Okay, so we need the neurosurgeon to tick that off. So having spoken to a neurosurgeon, he's told us that that could occur as early as 8 weeks if things go relatively to plan or routine. So say if at 8 weeks he gets the sign off from the neurosurgeon from a structural point of view, he then comes into the hands of the club doctors. Okay, we then have to get him back. So I know you're thinking, well, if the neurosurgeon sign him off at 8 weeks, if what you said is true and the bone heals quite predictably, what's the problem? What you have to appreciate is with the level of this injury, he could have suffered a minor traumatic brain injury. Okay, so it's kind of like a concussion where the brain has been shifted within the skull and you get damage to the brain cells. Okay, so with that, Raul could be suffering from longer term deficits in his brain function and cognition. That could include affecting things such as his memory, his ability to concentrate for long periods of time, ability to make decisions quickly. When he exercises, he might start to feel like he's in a fog. These are all sort of concussion type symptoms. I'll put some examples on the screen right now, and he might be battling with those for a long period of time, and those are very, very hard to rehab from. There are graduated return to play guidelines for people with concussion or concussive symptoms, so he would have to go through that process, and we would need to be confident that he is fine from a concussion and traumatic brain injury point of view. He could also actually be suffering from more major brain injury. We don't know yet. We hope not, but we don't know yet. If he's actually suffered structural damage to the brain or had a bleed in the brain, he could actually be having neurological deficits, and I would say that's the third domain that he needs to recover from. We need to make sure he doesn't actually have problems with his actual ability to coordinate, his strength in his upper limbs and lower limbs, hand-eye coordination, his foot-eye coordination, his sensation down his arms and legs. These are all important things that we need to make sure that he recovers from well. And for those two domains, concussion symptoms and neurological symptoms, I personally would be leaning very heavily on neurology specialists to do the relevant tests and sort of clear him from that point of view. So that's what he needs to get through as well. So we've said he needs to be signed off by the neurosurgeons. We probably need a neurologist to help us sign him off from a concussion symptoms point of view and to rule out other neurological deficits that he could suffer from, like weakness or change in his coordination. And then there's something else that I think people forget, which is really, really important, and that's Raul's own psychological state. I think he's released a statement saying that he's looking forward to getting back already and wants to get back this season, but end of the day, he has suffered an injury similar to what he may have suffered in a car crash. You know, it was a big injury and he's had a major surgery. And so when the time actually comes to put him in on the field and him having to go up there and challenge against another opponent, that's a whole nother story. And will he have it in him to do that? I think at first, probably not. I think it will take him time. I think in terms of training, he'll have to have modified training for quite a long period of time, quite a significant period of non-contact training, just getting used to just being back on the pitch, and then build him up and then see how he gets on. He might need counselling. You know, you never know. You never know. It's a very, very traumatic experience for him, really. So that's important to take into account as well. In terms of psychologically, you've got to bear in mind as well, if you're not 100% confident and if you don't go into challenges 100%, you're at higher risk of getting other injuries, not just head injuries. So that's what you've got to bear in mind if you're a health professional working with this player. If he's not got confidence, he's going to end up going half-heartedly into a challenge and get absolutely clattered by the opposition and potentially suffer a major injury to his leg, his knee, his ankle. So that is of critical importance too. Those are the things that are going to hold him back. Now, am I optimistic he'll return? Yes. Firstly, the Wolves medical team are really, really experienced and they'll be dealing with this in the most appropriate way, that's for sure. And on top of that, speaking of the neurosurgeon, he was pretty optimistic too, so obviously that gives me confidence. But we've seen two high-profile examples of depressed skull fractures in football that I can remember. Petr Cech, who got kneed in the head against Reading a few years back, and Ryan Mason, who suffered an injury with a similar mechanism to RAUL Jimenez. Petr Cech came back in just over 12 weeks, so about 3 months with headgear. Ryan Mason, unfortunately, was unable to return. And, you know, although we don't know exactly the difference between the two injuries, you wonder what steps that Ryan got stuck on. You know, was it the neurosurgery point of view? Were they never comfortable with him from a structural point of view in his brain? Did he have ongoing symptoms related to concussion, or was he not quite feeling right? Was his confidence just shot? We don't know. So those are the things we've got to bear in mind when you ask, when is Raul going to come back? If you want my short answer, I'm always an optimist. So I think he can come back. I'm optimistic. And I think it's possible he comes back before the end of the season. Maybe a 3 to 6 month window to come back. So if the end of season's in May, I think he could come back. But I think we need to be fair to the gentleman, give him time to come back and not expect too much straight away when he returns. else. I personally would also put him in a helmet, protective headgear, and I think psychologically that will help him as well. Anyway, I hope that was insightful and interesting for you. Said if you like this content, hit subscribe, join the party, like and share as well. Ask me any questions you want, and look forward to the Neurosurgeon video, which I will release once I finish editing it. It is a long process editing these videos. Other than that, you guys take care. I'll do what I usually do. I'll drop the music, the dramatic music, and I'll be off. Here we are. Sarah.